One of the leaders or pastor, if you want to run the slides. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Pat.
I think that we should recognize the work kind of put into that slideshow and the music. That was
thanks, guys. Just let you know, it was a joy doing all this for the Lord. It was a ministry that He has called me into. So, all right, let's just jump right into it. So, Father, I just thank you so much for your blessings and the joy that you have put in the hearts of your children, Father. Lord, let us have open ears to your word, Father, as we talk about the story of David, Lord. David is, underneath Jesus, David was taught more than any other character in the Bible, Father. It's obvious that you want us to learn something from this. And it's obvious, Lord, that this foreshadows the gospel. Lord, let the gospel be spoken tonight and reached, Lord. Father, we just ask these in your name that you just bless the group, Lord. Amen. So, how many have heard the story of David and Goliath? Okay. Now, how many have heard the story given to you in the perspective of Goliath is giants or something in your life that is hindering you from something, and you are David? How many have heard it spoken like that? I know I have. I've always heard it like that. I'm David, and my sin is Goliath, or whatever is. It could even be like financial, thing. That's Goliath. Whatever's burdened me is Goliath, and I've heard that before, and I've taken it into my own hands and tried to imitate David. Tried to imitate, his faith, and imitate, his heart for the Lord and his passion but I'm going to be delivering the message in a different way to you guys tonight, because isn't so much the gospel. If we were to put ourselves in David's position, and we are the ones fighting the giant, we are the ones conquering something, it's because of our doing or our works. That's not so much the gospel, and I just have a hard time, and I have a hard time just not preaching it this way, because as I read through Samuel, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, it is just so according to the gospel. Everything is just so precise, and I believe that this is the same way. So we're going to go right into the next scripture of where we left off. Yeah. So, in this story, we are not the heroes. That's kind of what I'm going to get across to you guys. We are not the heroes in the story, but someone greater is, and we are need to focus on that tonight. Okay. So, starting out the next scripture, it says, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and they were gathered in Socoh, which belongs to Judah. They encamped between Socoh and Azekah and Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in the battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines or Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them." Now, I said before that most of our battles are fought in the valley, and I know that many of us have gone through valleys before and have had these battles or these giants. And I'm not trying to tell you that it's not our place to have these giants, be taken care of. God will help you with that. But the idea of thinking that it's on you to take care of that giant is you're gonna fail doing that. So we see here that we have the Philistines on one side of the hill, and you have Israel on the other side. And they send out their champion Goliath, and he taunts them, and no one wants to fight up against him. And not only was it a lack of faith in God that Israel had against the Philistines, but it was much more because the great Philistine army, they had like serious military technology. This is the nation that was living in the promised land, and that God told them to kick out of the promised land. He was telling Israel to remove these people out of the promised land. So this is their enemy, their greatest enemy in this moment. And that's why the Israelites wanted a king. And they said, I'm going to put my trust in Saul to overcome the Philistines. So it wasn't only a lack of faith that they didn't want to fight them, but also because they were they had very good technology in military. It says that the Philistines were the only generation, or the first nation that mastered the technique of bronze and ironworking, and that was huge. As they are going off with bronze swords and spears and javelins, you see Israel. They would be having more of like slingshots and sticks and staffs, and occasionally an iron sword, which was very rare. But that's what they looked like. So just off the bat, these guys were a great army. They had bronze armor, they had bronze weapons, they had metal, they were advanced. And what they also had was the chariots. The Philistine chariots were huge, and you put two horses in front of an armored chariot and have people throwing javelins. You're basically like a tank, in modern day, and nothing really could stand against that. So it wasn't just a lack of faith in God that Israel had, but it was also that they were up against this great, nation. So next verse it says, "And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze." So right away, Samuel is trying to tell you guys that this guy was a champion, and he was a champion for a reason. He didn't lose. He was a champion, and he was big. And some say, 6 cubits, some say he was over 9 feet tall. Some say that, it was just over 7 feet tall. But the point is that in comparison to the Israelites, or in comparison to David, he was huge. He was a champion. He was undefeatable. And so, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and it was iron. And it said that this iron head could have weighed up to 15 pounds. And this weaver's beam, so you can imagine like the spear is about like that big around. Who knows? The whole point is that this guy is big, and he's got armor, and he's a champion. And he's a champion for a reason. I'll go back one more. His spearhead weighed about 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. So not only did he have all this armor, and not only was he huge and had bronze and weapons, but he also had a shield bearer who went in front of him, who would carry his shield for him and block for him. Now, if you guys can picture this giant with a shield bearer in front of him, how would you ever get a chance to attack that? You have to go through his shield bearer before you can even touch this giant. It's just at the moment the Israelites knew that it was a no-go. They couldn't do this. This was a champion who was undefeated and unstoppable. All right, next one. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle?" Basically saying, what are you wasting your time for? What are you wasting your time? am I not a Philistine? And you are the servants of Saul. And right there he's saying, like, am I not part of the Philistine army? The great Philistine army? And who are you? Who is Saul? He's basically saying, like, and you're servants of this guy named Saul, this king that you have put, and you can just have Israel, like, thinking, like, man, this king that we put all our trust in, I'm hoping that some, regret is coming in, or godly sorrow is coming in for that. And Goliath says, choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. He's saying, we're going to conquer in ways. Let's avoid all the bloodshed, and you just send out your greatest warrior, and we'll fight to the death. And whoever wins, the other nation will be our servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. Vice versa. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. How would you get past that guy, Goliath? Israel is getting the picture that they are doomed at this moment, shaking in their leather. Now, if you want to go to the next one. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Samuel is trying to put a picture in your guys' heads that there was nobody in this army that had the guts or the stomach to go up against this champion. No one. There was no one. And you would think that, like, if it would be anybody, maybe it would be like Eliab, David's oldest brother. He was strong. He was a big warrior. He was mastered and skilled. But no, he was shaken in his boots too. And then you would think maybe even King Saul. If anyone should have went out against this Philistine, it would have been the king, right? The one that everyone's put all their faith in. Israel's put all their faith in this king. And he's hiding, and he doesn't want to go out. It's just to show that if we put our faith in humans, if we put our faith in someone that can fail, who doesn't have a perfect track record, then you will fail too. But if you put your faith in God, who is so much greater, then the victory is already won for you. Now, when we try to be the hero, or when we try to be the David in this situation, we are missing something very important. Goliath is representing something undefeatable. He's representing something very great. And it's greater than just a financial struggle, or greater than just some burden on your life, or whatever. And not saying that those are something to take care of, but this story is Goliath is representing something different, something undefeatable. And what that was, it was sin and death. That's what Goliath was representing. Israel didn't realize. They thought their greatest enemy was the Philistines. But really their greatest enemy was sin and death. And they didn't realize that. So when we try to be the hero in our lives, we miss the point that it's not our battle to fight. Or we miss the point of that it's already been won, really. Now, if you drop down, and it's not on the slide, but if you drop down to verse 46 in 1 Samuel chapter 17, David says, the battle is yours, Lord, as he's going after Goliath. He says, the battle is yours. And David knew that it wasn't him who was being the hero, because he knew that he couldn't take on this giant, but that God would, and that it would be in his name, and the battle was his. Now, God will help you with your battles. But it's about the motive of, are you doing it to, out of your own work? Are you relying on your performance to take care of these battles? Because in that case, your stone might miss. And then what? I hope you don't get discouraged, but you might. But if you put your faith in Jesus, who has overcame sin and death, then you believe that, and exclusively on that, then you already have the victory. Now, you can go to the next slide. So then it skips over and it says, Then Jesse said to his son David, so this is back in Bethlehem, Now for your brothers in ephah of this, Take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves of bread, and run to your brothers at the camp. And carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their thousands. Basically, he's like the pizza delivery guy, if you think about it. He's got bread and cheese. And see how your brothers fare, or basically see how they're doing. Give us a report, and bring me back news of them. Now, Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. You can go to the next one. So David knew that this battle was the Lord's. He knew he couldn't do it without God. But the thing is that we're not even to that point yet. He doesn't even know what's going on. He's arriving to this scene, and he hears the battle cries of the Philistines, or the Israel and the Philistines, and he's arriving as a young boy to this. I know I'm saying Philistines and Philistines. I don't know exactly what it is. Philistines. Well, what if you're saying in a Philistine?
Philistine.
Oh, okay. It's not a word?
No.
I might keep using it because I like it. So, faithful as David is, he listens to his father, and he arises early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, and took the things and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight and shouting for battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper, ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. Now, there's a really important and cool idea or fact that we're going to come up here soon, and we're going to get to it. But I just want to I like putting things in your head, trying to picture being there. There's a huge war going on, and all of these men are dismayed and frightened of this Philistine who is coming out day after day and taunting and defying the Lord. And so all these men are great men of Israel are shaking and scared. And this little boy comes up and basically is like, "What's going on?" Like this, and they're all thinking like this little punk, my brother, little punk is coming up and like trying to get into this, And so next part. Then, as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines.
Philistines.
I feel like you guys all just said something different.
Okay.
Alright. You can laugh at me if I say it wrong. I'm just going to continue to say it however it comes out. I'm not learning right now. Armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them. And he hears this giant, just like cursing the Lord in the army. And David, with his heart for the Lord, he must be, confused. Like, what is going on? So David heard him, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. Now, it's cool because this isn't the first time that Goliath came out. This is like could have even been the last time, the 40th time, and I think it was. He came out 40 days. Just like, sin and death, it's going to keep coming back. It's going to be persistent until you have it taken care of by Jesus. And you believe that. And until that, it's going to keep coming back at you day after day, taunting you. So this is like, it could have even been the last time, and Israel is still hearing it and deadly afraid and running. They've heard the same taunt 40 times, and they're still afraid. It didn't get old to them. They know that they're doomed. They are doomed. there's this champion that's undefeatable. Guys, there's this thing in this world, it's called sin and death, and it is undefeatable by us. We cannot defeat it.
Amen.
Yeah. So the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel, and it shall be that the man who kills him, the king, will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemptions from taxes in Israel. Tax break, I'll take it. So,
Right on.
the interesting point here is that David is hearing this, and David asks again. Can you go to the next one? David asks again. He says, then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? He just heard the answer, but he still asks again. For who is this circumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And he's asking these questions, and you see in the next verses that, if you want to go to the next one, that his brothers are getting fed up with him. Like, basically, what are you doing here? Why are you asking these questions? You're just a boy. You're just trying to get in the middle of this. But this was important because David is drawing out the rewards of killing this giant. He's drawing it out of the people. Saul, no one could go against the Lord out of faith in God. No one could go against the Goliath just out of pure faith in the Lord. And they were shaking, and they didn't. So what did Saul do? He gave him a reward. He said, you know what if I give you all the riches and a hot girlfriend, and I will give you, I'll make your family free of taxes. Then will you do it? And they still said no. And the point is that they wouldn't even do it for the Lord and have faith that they had to have these rewards given out to them. It's like they had to have some sort of incentive to have faith in the Lord. And it's like they forgot all the things that the Lord has drawn their family out of Egypt and all these awesome victories. They forgot that long ago when they made Saul their king and not God their king. And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. So they tell him again, this is what I just said, David. I'm not going to say it again. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David. And he said, why do you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? So not only is he angry at him, but he's like picking on him. He's discouraging him, saying that why are you even here? What about those few sheep? Basically, they just was taken care of. You're a shepherd boy. What are you doing here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. Now, I don't know exactly what Eliab is mentioning here. Maybe they had some brother, relations where he could, see something in David. David wasn't perfect, and we know that, and we realize that as the story goes on. But he had a heart after the Lord, which is what mattered. And David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? Basically, I came here to give you food and to give a good report for Father, and you're angry at me. Then he turned from him to another and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first ones did. They gave him the same answer. Now, what's cool is that David knew when to stop talking to his brother. He knew when to turn away and move on. I wanted to stop here real quick and to just give a little nugget that as Christians, we need to know when we're being taunted or being discouraged, we need to know when enough is enough and to not speak towards that, but speak towards the true enemy, which would be sin and death or Goliath. Not to speak towards his brother. He didn't stand there and kept arguing with his brother about it. He turned away. And I feel like there's a time in our lives and in our conversations when people are trying to discourage us and trying to persecute us, and there's a time where we don't need to respond back. And we see it on Facebook, and I have been guilty of it before too, where people are persecuting us, and we haven't done anything wrong but share God's word. out of love, and people are coming out against us. And the trick is to hold your tongue and to not retaliate. To know that the battle is already won, to know that you haven't done anything wrong. David knew he didn't do anything wrong. He said, what is the cause? I've only come here to help and bring you pizza, and you are telling me that I only have 3 sheep to take care of. Like, what the heck? So, let's move on. And then David said to Saul, then he turned from his brother. Now, when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. For your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. Now, if you guys have your Bibles, I want you to go quickly to Romans 3, verses 9. Philistine. Right?
Just think of Philippine. Philistine.
Okay, Steen. Philistine. I didn't hear it. Maybe it's good. Okay. Whoever wants to read Romans chapter 3, verse 9 and 12. Now, before you read this, whoever is going to, Nate, you want to do it? Okay. This is Paul talking about how he's saying, as Gentiles, like who are we, to think that we can overcome sin and death. So go ahead, Nate. This is talking about the undefeatable sin and death, as if we try to approach it as humans. Go ahead.
You wanted 9 through 12, not just 9 and 12.
9 through 12.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. What then? Are we better than they? Not at all. For we have previously charged both Jews and Greeks, they are all under sin. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands, there is none who seeks after God. They have all turned aside, they have together become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one.
What Paul is trying to get across there is that sin and death is a force that a human has no chance of standing up against. And if you are fighting Goliath solo, then you will always fail, and you will always lose. If you are living your life fighting solo against Goliath and basing your victories on your works, or basing your, on even if it's good works or even your sin or your mishaps, you're always going to fail, and you're going to start self-condemning yourself, saying that when I am living a righteous life, I'm going to be going to heaven, and I hope God comes soon. But when I'm living a sinful life and I haven't repented, then I'm going to be going to hell if He comes soon, and I hope He doesn't, because I'm not ready for Him to come. And if you are living your lives in that mindset, thinking that the battle is still, with sin and death, is still in front of you, and you are trying to fight it solo, and even if you are trying to muster up faith, even if you're trying to muster up faith to, like, God, give me the faith to go after this giant, give me the faith, the point is that the victory is already won in Jesus. The point is that you can do whatever you want to try to make yourself righteous to get into heaven, but it's not going to work. It's not by works that we get there. And guys, it should be a relief to us, because who matches up for heaven? Not I. Who deserves heaven? Not I. Who deserves to dwell in the house of the Lord forever? Definitely not I. I don't deserve it. You guys don't deserve it. Now, if you are living a life right now solo fighting against this giant, and you have not repented of your sins and trusted in God exclusively in Him, and you're standing in front of this giant, please know that you will fail. Israel is failing right now because they have put their faith in a human, Saul. They put their faith in works, not in God, not in Jesus. If you are trying to fight this battle that you can't win. You are trying to be good enough to get to heaven. But it won't work, and that's not how it works. But by grace we have been saved. Through faith. Not by anything that we do, or have done, or will do, but because God sent His Son to take on, and He killed Him for our sake, of Jesus who lived a perfect, precious life, killed Him on the cross, so that we now can receive that gift and have victory over sin and death. That was the victory, was on the cross. And it's grace. And if you're living a life thinking that I'm righteous today and I'm not righteous today, and I'm talking to Christians who have believed in what Jesus did for them. If you're living a life thinking I'm righteous today and now I've sinned and I am not righteous anymore and I need to fix something to have my salvation back. I don't think that way anymore. I don't think you should either, and I believe that's wrong. Because what you're saying is that your works is what's basing your righteousness. Your good works is going to make you righteous, and your bad works are going to make you not righteous. And you're taking away what you're doing when you think like that, guys, is that, and I'm thinking this way too sometimes. It's a message for Christians and non-believers. But what you're doing, when you make it about your performance, you are weakening the strength of the cross. You're weakening the strength of what Jesus did for you, of His victory. So if you are going to go solo against Goliath, you will lose every time. But if you trust that the Lord has taken the victory, and like David said, this is the Lord's, as he ran after Goliath. This is the Lord's victory. If you take a hold of that, then that victory will be yours too. And Saul said to David, so this is after David told Saul that he wants to go after Goliath. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. All right. You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him. For you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. There was a reason why Goliath was the champion of Philistine. For David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it, and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard, and struck and killed it. Now, David has not forgotten what God has done in his life. He brings these victories that the Lord has done in his life to Saul to say, look what the Lord has done. Why would you doubt him? Why would you doubt him? And this is what Israel, in the contrary, has done, is they have forgotten what the Lord has done for them when he was their king. They've forgotten all the victories. Nate McGann, you talked about reflecting on our lives as Christians and reflecting on the Lord's victory in our lives. And why? Because it reminds us of God's perfect track record. It reminds us of his undefeatable track record. It reminds us that all the good things he's done for us. But when you forget those things, you get discouraged and you start putting your faith in other people or other things. Now David is not forgetting. He brings up that the Lord has rescued me from a lion and from a bear. And I think it says lions and, does it say lion or a bear came? So I think some versions say that there was more than one time that this has happened. And the Lord has rescued me through it. And I have faith in him because of it. And I remember those things. Next, chapter 3, verse 36. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. You see where his faith is? Seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. He will deliver me. David knows that he isn't anything special. He knows that he has an anointed calling on his life to be king. He knows that he dwells with the Lord in the pastures, but without God, he's nothing. And without the Lord in your lives, where would we go? For Jesus, you have the words of everlasting life. Where would we go without you? Shepherd, good shepherd, where would we go? So Saul finally agrees with him and says, fine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. So Saul clothed David. Saul comes up with this idea that he's got to take my armor at least. He says, so Saul clothed David with his armor and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. Now, right here can be an example of Saul, trying to do these works, trying to add on, trying to have faith in the armor and not in God. And it's just like in our lives, how sometimes we try to have these works they come again, and they either are discouraging us or they're making us feel more righteous and worthy of heaven. But we are righteous because Christ is. We're righteous because of what Jesus did, not because of what we have done. So he puts on the stuff and he tests it. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. Basically, I'm not used to this armor. There it is. I'm taking it off. I'm going with my leather and my slingshot. So David took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. And he put them in his shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. And the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy, and good-looking.
Jealous.
He probably was a little jealous. Actually, no, he probably wasn't. This Goliath not only was big and terrible, but he knew how to speak against God. He knew how to make people feel ashamed and defy him. Sometimes if someone is so big and nasty, they don't have to say anything for you to be scared of them. But Goliath had that psychological voice too that was scaring Israel. And he's trying to do it to David. But the cool thing is that what Samuel is trying to show us here is that over and over, David is looked at as not being worthy of to fight. And it's true. It is very true. I bet if they did a poll on who was going to go after the Goliath and they handed out a survey, that David would be the absolute last person that they would have set forth to go after Goliath. Because there was nothing special about him. And the thing is about this is that the Lord fights our battles in very mysterious ways. He really does. And the Eliab should have fought Goliath. King Saul should have fought him. Those should have been the people that should have they should have given their strongest warrior and sent him out. But they waited 40 days and still they haven't sent out anybody. So what we see here is that God fights our battles in mysterious ways, and he has David, this ruddy boy who was good looking, had nice eyes, but that's about all he had going for him, go up against this Philistine. And the reason why this is directed towards the gospel is because when Jesus came, it was not what the Jews expected. Because the Jews, if you were to tell the Jews back then that their greatest enemy was sin and death, they would have said, "I've already heard that before. That's not what we need a king for. We need a king to defeat, the nations. Roman Empire would have been, the Jews' enemy. Their greatest enemy would have been the Roman Empire. So they wanted a king sent from God that was going to be big and strong, just like Israel did. And they wanted a king that was going to take out their greatest enemy, which would have been Rome. But really, their greatest enemy was still sin and death. And Jesus, it says in Isaiah that Jesus, he was. Maybe you could help me with this. If you guys remember, but it was basically that Jesus was had no void, and he had no majesty when he was on earth, and that he wasn't anything pretty to look at. He wasn't special, and you wouldn't have been able to pick him out in a crowd saying that is the Son of God, and he had no majesty on the earth. And it's the same with David. It's not David's majesty. He would have been the last person to go up against Goliath, and Jesus in those days would have been the last person to go up against sin and death. Go up against Rome, really, is what the Jews thought. So the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" He's a staff, and that's what he's getting at. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the fields." He's trying to get in his head. But it's not working, is it? No. Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take off your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth. And all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." Can you just imagine, just David, it's the Lord's battle. You have defied against God, and I'm not worried about you. I have no weapons but my sling, and you have sword and an armor barrier. But the thing is that the Lord doesn't fight with sword, because it's his battle. We don't need that. We have him. My faith is in you, Lord, David is saying. My faith is in you, and I remember what you have done for me, and you are going to deliver this Philistine in my hands. And I'm going to cut off his head. So it was, when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, I love this part, that David hurried and ran toward the enemy to meet the Philistine. David, he wasn't second guessing himself, like Zane jumping off a cliff, He wasn't I don't know if I should. Yes, God, you've saved me. No, I'm going to. David wasn't second guessing himself, and David didn't need the Israelite kings or the people to cheer him on. Some might think that Elijah would be like, "Yeah, go, we want to be tax free, go, go fight this Philistine." And but no, David didn't need that. There was no hesitation because he believed fully in what Jesus did for him. And he knew that the victory was already won. It's like he knew Jesus was to come. It's like he knew that sin and death was already taken care of. It's like God revealed that to him. And he knew in his heart that there was nothing to fear. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I'm going. I'm running. And he runs. He runs towards the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. The Lord knew exactly where to put that stone. I mean, that guy was probably armored up head to toe, but he had to have little holes to see. maybe like that. And that stone came perfectly and killed Goliath and knocked him, and he fell on his face. David, to the Israelites, has overcame Goliath. You can just imagine at this point what's going on in the hearts of the Israelites. Like, the ones who were shaking in their boots, they have now seen David, and they have seen their enemy fall on his face. And he's done for, and he's dead. Like, if you guys can relate or imagine what's going on in their hearts, have you guys ever been like stressed before and like worried or scared for your life? There has been times where I was scared for my life because I thought I was going to hell. I thought if Jesus came back right now, I would be going to hell. Now, this was after I believed in him, but it wasn't exclusively, and I was relying on my own works and to make it to heaven. And that's what Israel was doing. Now, it's going to be about the motives of why you are fighting this battle for the Lord, or why are you allowing the Lord to fight this battle for you. If your motives are to get the reward or to get the riches or the hot girl or the tax-free life, if your motive is that you are doing the work, you're doing the performance, that's where the line is being drawn. But if the motive is that Jesus has already overcame, and that if I believe in him, then I have victory, then you will get rewarded for that. And you will have the victory, guys and gals, myself, because this message is for all, because very often do we get discouraged in our works instead of just knowing what we need to do next, instead of dwelling in our sin. So David prevailed. He prevailed over the Philistine. The next point is that when God takes action, and when God had victory, Jesus had victory over sin and death, it was finished. Absolutely finished. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head. He has cut off the head. Jesus has cut off the head of sin and death. And the reason why David did this is to show that people didn't have to make a decision on who won, based off points or something. Like, did Goliath win or did David win? Like they do in boxing. Like, this was there was no question about it. It was taken care of. He had his head, and he took it to Jerusalem, and he took his armor, Goliath's armor, and put it in his tent. And he's showing that the battle is finished. There's no dispute on who won here. And when Jesus said, "It is finished," on the cross, when those words came out of his mouth, and he said, "It is finished," it's the same thing. There's no dispute. There's no dispute. You are righteous because you exclusively believe what Jesus has did, and you have the victory because you believe in Jesus and because he has overcame, and it is finished. When David killed Goliath and cut off his head, that's the same moment when Jesus died on the cross. That the victory was taken, and it's over. If you're fighting solo against a giant, then it's not over for you, and it's not going to turn out good. All you have to do is believe exclusively that Jesus has paid the price, a very, very valuable price for our sin, and you will have that victory, guys. God's fights are finished. So, we're pretty late. We usually end a little bit earlier than this, so we're definitely not going to go into small groups. You guys, we might want to stand and just do a prayer together in a circle. We always do it, and it's really fun. And we